Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
I don't want to speak for you, but this has probably been one of the busiest Junes that I've had in quite a while. And it feels like it's been one of the busier Junes for you. So together, outside of Dyson Mind, it feels like we've like constantly like been shuffling between things you've had going on and things that I've
Yeah.
had going on. And so today we are doing some of our normal prep recording for our episode that we're going to be talking about here shortly, with our special returning guest. But it feels like we haven't chatted about in the Dyson Mind Sphere, um, the Dimverse, as we can call it.
Oh, God. As we shall not call it. No,
um,
you're right, though. You are
you know,
definitely right.
it feels like we haven't done it. We haven't talked about it in a while, and there's been a lot going on. Um,
Yeah.
you
We
know,
we so I mean this episode, as you are all listening to this, dear audience,
if
it
you are
is
if you're listening on the day it drops.
right. If you're listening on the day it drops, it's the first day of July. Otherwise, everyone else is listening after that. So obviously, we're recording this right before it rolls over to the release date. Um, no, it's true. I mean, Brad, you and I talk. I mean, we talk all the time, but we haven't really talked Dice and Mind in a while. And now that's not obvious from our episodes, but in terms of our recording schedule, uh, I would go so far as to say this has been one of the busiest May and June stretches I think both of us have had in a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, yes, this is, I, I've said this to you already. I've said this to a few people. I remember as spring semester, like the end of it was on the horizon, like, oh, okay, there is going to come a summer. I remember saying to my wife that, okay, you know what? I know it's going to be busier this summer a bit, but it'll just be glorious to not have meetings. And if I had just stopped and listened, I would have heard the cosmos laughing at me in the distance. Much like that, yes. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
I
So
hey,
yeah,
I
this has been busy.
I worked at an organization where it sounds humorous, but I would literally have, 9 to 12 hour meetings scheduled in an 8 hour day, and that was because
Yeah,
people would
yeah.
over and double schedule
I
meetings.
remember you said that.
Um, as you know, I got back last week from a short family excursion
Yep.
to South Central US to the Smoky Mountain area. It's always, and you know this better than anyone I currently or have ever known, it is always good to refocus and to get out into nature. And there
Yeah.
is nothing to me that refocuses me or reminds me of just how I don't want this to sound to minimize it, but just how minuscule and how, you know,
Yeah.
how
It
minuscule we are when you look at
yeah.
yourself just in the grand scheme of things, and you look up in the sky at night, or when you look upon yourself and when I sit and I look out and I see these mountains,
And
and
then you think back. No, I agree completely. And I know where you're going, right? You're out there in a place like that, and you think back to, oh man, I thank God for the break. I was scrambling. And why was I worried about any of this stuff? None of that stuff back home at work ultimately matters much at
bingo.
all. Why am I stressing? And like you said, like I'm not that important. None of these decisions are that important. And if I find myself stopping and saying, no, 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 that's not true. Yeah, it is true. That's just ego and anxiety. And that's why we need to sometimes get out there into nature and just decompress and recalibrate and remind ourselves sometimes forcefully, we're just not that important. And it's okay to say, nope, not today.
No, and we stopped and we took a tour of Mammoth Cave, and it just
So
reminded me
cool.
of, you know, of and you see it with nature and everything else, especially down in those caves. Those things were going to happen.
Yeah.
Nature's going to move, whether we like it or not.
Well, what's the line? Nature will find a way.
Yeah.
Right.
I was, it took a second. It took a second for me to figure out that you were intentionally creating a
That's
bad
my
impression.
best
Yes.
Jeff Goldblum that I can muster.
Yes, yes. It took me a second. But I think I told you maybe it wasn't last night, it was the night before. But I came back refreshed. I
Yeah.
had, refreshed in some areas.
Yep.
Still, there are things that I had purposefully kind of said, okay, I'm going to really focus on this when I get back.
Yeah.
There's some writing, obviously, that I started working on. I am full bore on. Um, from an RPG perspective, you have some travel that as this drops is in progress. For you, when you get back, you already have it on the calendar for us um, to boldly go back to where no man has gone before.
Boldly return to where we left off a month ago.
Yes, there it is.
Right.
Um, and there's some material that I had been waiting to pick up
Yeah.
until after I got back because I didn't want things waiting for me and sitting here untouched.
Yep.
So, but that being said, um, we were talking about even reading materials and
Uh, there
and
we are.
books
Yep.
and a, you know our one of our earlier guests,
Just a lovely person.
yes, um, reached out to us because
He's got another book that has come out.
yes,
And I mean we always enjoy and appreciate hearing from past guests and especially when they want to come back to the show. And this- Brad is trying very hard to get his automatic Zoom stuff to work where it gives you all the weird stuff on screen. And Brad's now reached a point in his life where even Zoom is ignoring him.
I turned it on.
Yeah, it's like you're married to it. I digress. So yeah, we had the very good fortune of having a previous guest come back to talk about his latest book. And when we had him on the first time, he was recently off of a previous book. And it's interesting because he writes YA. Right.
Mhm.
I think it's fair to say neither of us are avid YA readers. And in fact, I mean, right, we're both, shall we say, floating around 50. There was no such thing as YA literature when we were YA, right? This is very much a thing
Well,
contemporaneous with our
I
own
think
kids.
you could,
There were books, but
there
there
were books.
wasn't
Was Judy Bloom YA at that point, or
this is a little old. Yeah, but Christopher Pike, right? Stuff like that. But
yeah,
still, this wasn't a massive,
no.
dedicated market in the same way that had its own section in the bookstore. Like just the other day, actually, around the time of our interview with our guest, and we'll stop being subtle in a moment. I had run this by my daughters just because I'm like, hey, I'm talking to the guy who wrote this. Would you be interested in reading it? And we got into a discussion where they were explaining, okay, well, YA is kind of changing now, and there's a new category. And like they were walking me through, like, here are kind of the target markets now in the modern bookstore around age. And it's really interesting. Okay, that also said then, so we've got the lovely individual of James Sutter back on Dyson Mind. So glad to have him back. He not only writes YA, but he writes uh what we call queer LGBTQA oriented YA. So it's not just like a love story that's really typical. It's interesting and it's dynamic and it can be edgy. And James is always good for just really creative ideas. Like as he, and you'll hear this as he walked us through the concept for this new book, this most recent book. Um, he's telling us about it, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, you've got like A, B, and C. How did he ever like see the connections between them? But the result is, of course, he crafts these really neat, really endearing stories. James L. Sutter is a co-creator of the Pathfinder and Starfinder role-playing games. From 2004 to 2017, he worked for Paizo Publishing, starting out as an editor on Dungeon Magazine, going on to do foundational work for Pathfinder, and eventually becoming the creative director in charge of launching Starfinder, as well as the executive editor of the Pathfinder Tales novel line for Paizo and Tor, before leaving to write full-time. James is also the author of the young adult romance novels Dark Hearts and The Ghost of Us, as well as the fantasy novels Death's Heretic, a finalist for the Compton Crook Award for Best First Novel, and The Redemption Engine, which won the 2015 Scribe Award for Best Original Speculative Novel. His short stories have appeared in such venues as Nightmare, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Escape Pod, and the #1 Amazon bestseller Machine of Death. In addition, he's written comic books, essays in venues like Clark World and Lightspeed Queers Destroy Science Fiction, a wealth of tabletop gaming material and video games. When not writing, James has performed with musical acts ranging from metalcore to musical theater. He lives in Seattle.
As you heard just before we started here, we have James back on with us, and we are so happy
We are.
for you to join us
Welcome
again.
back.
Yes, welcome back.
Thanks for
Uh,
having me back.
and we have you back because you have something new coming out, or
Oh,
has come
congratulations.
out
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us, and we'd love to talk about it.
New.
Um, what is new out for purchase these days
Yes.
that has your name on it?
Yes.
So my new book is another queer young adult romance novel. This one is called The Ghost of Us, and it's basically 10 Things I Hate About You meets Ghost. So it stars a teenage ghost hunter who's, a social outcast trying to find a way to get famous, finding a ghost because she figures that's her only chance at a decent life. And she finds a ghost, the ghost of this upperclassman who died the previous year, which should be great, but his condition is that if she wants him to help her prove ghosts are real, she has to go draw his little sister out of her shell. She's become, a depressed recluse since her older brother died. And
Mhm.
so he's like, take my little sister to prom, and I will give you all the evidence you need. If not, no dates, no ghost.
You were
And
not kidding about that description of Ghost plus 10 things I hate about you.
Wow.
right. And so that she's
Wow.
got, there's sort
Oh,
of this whole supernatural fake dating thing where she's trying to woo this girl with the ghost of the girl's older brother kind of whispering in her ear. And then, of course, things get very complicated because she starts to actually fall for this girl and then is thinking like, oh, but it's all built on a lie. And
yeah.
also, so the ghost, his whole mission on Earth, the reason he's still here is his unfinished business is making sure his sister is happy. So as his sister gets happier, he starts to fade. And so our main character, Kara, has to kind of decide, well, if I, keep dating this girl who I really like, I'm going to lose my only shot at, finding fame through ghost hunting. But
Right.
if I stop, they're both going to hate me. What do I do?
Okay, I got to ask because when we had you last on, you had your other book had come out. Was this already was
Yeah.
the you know I keep using this pun saying I don't like it. Was the sausage already being made as you were talking to us last time?
Yes, and I'm so glad that it was, because something they don't necessarily tell you when you're first getting published as a novelist, but that I try to tell everybody is once you write your first book, like as soon as you hear that book is going to sell, or even
Yeah.
before that book sells, write another one. Because when that book does sell, like I was, halfway through writing The Ghost of Us when Dark Hearts sold. And
Wow.
then I finished it right before Dark Hearts came out, which is great because you spend so much time trying to promote your new book.
Yeah.
I feel bad for all the authors who are trying to, promote the book that just came out, but you're also trying to write and do edits and stuff on the book that comes out next. And if you're going at a book every year, which is pretty common, that's a breakneck pace where you're always trying to sell something and write the next thing at the same time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even more than that. And so I was very lucky that I had the book mostly handled by the time Dark Hearts came out. So I could just kind of focus on promoting Dark Hearts and also just, trying to fit in any sort of life bumps that, come up. It can be grueling. So yeah, get as much work done as you can in that year. Also, frankly, you're never going to feel better as an author than in that year or 2 years between when you get the book deal and when the book comes out. Because, being an author is great, but in that first year, you can imagine anything. It's like the dream is coming true, but it
Hmm.
hasn't actually come true yet. So
Hmm.
it's all Christmas Eve, no Christmas morning, where you're just excited to see like you're gonna
Cool.
unwrap those presents. And some books do get huge and change your life and go on the bestseller lists. Most books don't. And so, there can be a real crash. I've heard a lot of authors talk about sort of the second book blues, where, A, uh, maybe your first book didn't get you on the Today Show, and so
Right.
you're having to deal with the reality of being a normal mid-list author. Um, and then also, your first book might have taken you 10 years to write, and then suddenly you're trying to write the next one in a
Jeez.
year in between working on the previous book. It's like the same thing in music all the time where you hear the sophomore slump where that second album, it's like, well, the first album had every good song that person has ever written in their entire life. And the next one has the songs they wrote on the tour bus, And so like I'm really happy with how The Ghost of Us came out. And
Yeah.
but I get it. I understand how much of a bumpy road that can be.
Second book, same publisher as the first. Yes.
Yes, and that's because I signed a 2 book deal.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that negates. I was going to ask how that was the second time around, but
Yeah.
okay.
So now the book that I'm writing is going to be, so the way these things normally work is you get however many books you've got on your contract. Sometimes they'll just buy one, sometimes it'll
Yeah.
be a 2 book deal, 3 book deal. And then when you finish that, most publishers will put in an option clause, and that option clause says, hey, for whatever your next book is, you have to let us look at it first. And we get 30
Oh,
days,
right.
60 days,
Hmm.
whatever, to make you an offer. And you can still reject that offer. You can
Yeah.
say, no, actually, we're going to go shop this around. But it at least gives them a chance to try and,
Right.
uh, not compete with everybody else.
Hmm.
So that's where I'll be next, is taking my next book to the publisher and saying, hey, what do you think? And then we'll just see what
That's cool.
happens.
So have you had a little bit of breathing time now? Have you
Oh, I took some breathing time after Dark Hearts came out. Like sort of I kind of took the fall off. I say I took the fall off. It was like half vacation, half nervous breakdown. But like everybody, like I feel like a lot of folks, a lot of authors I talked to early in the pandemic really kind of like just fell apart and couldn't write anything.
Oh, well.
I powered right through the pandemic and was writing all the time. And I feel like last year it finally caught up with me. And there was
Mm.
just, I was having a hell of a time writing. But fortunately, in 2024, I was able to get back on the horse. And now I'm really writing away. I'm about 2/3 of the way done drafting my new novel. And I'm
Wow.
really happy with it. So hopefully I'm back on that book a year schedule, but
Wow.
nothing's ever a given. I don't know. I know very few authors. I know a lot of very successful authors, and at least half of them are convinced that their next book will be their last. Because you just get so used to disaster in publishing that
Wow.
everybody's skittish all the time.
Yeah. With The Ghost of Us, it was there something that compelled you? I guess this is actually a question for either of the books or any of the three so far. Like, was there something especially that compelled you The story, the characters? Was it just like, this sounds neat, I think it would sell, I want to write about this, or was there something more?
Well, Dark Hearts was definitely the book before this. My first
Yeah.
queer young adult contemporary romance was called Dark Hearts, and it's all about falling in love with the boy who stole your chance to be a rock star.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of a friends to enemies to friends to lovers kind of story. And that one was really, it wasn't based factually on my own life. Like I
Yeah.
was never, the one breath away from being a pop star, but it was based on my life to a large extent because I had also been a teenage musician
Yeah.
and had had that feeling of having missed my shot. Of like you're really good when you're 15, 16, 17, and then suddenly you hit 20 and you haven't signed to a major label and you're suddenly like, "Oh, I guess I'm not the prodigy I thought I was," and
Hmm.
so it
Hmm.
it drew a lot on that experience and that experience of being an underage musician in Seattle. It was set in my own town, and it was also very much based on my own experience of coming out and sort of realizing that I was bisexual.
Hmm.
The main character goes through a very similar process. There's certainly scenes that are basically just torn right from my diary. Um, where lots of little details. So that one was largely from my life, and I remember the exact minute when I figured out that I wanted to write this
Oh,
book
that's
is
cool.
I was reading a Wikipedia entry on Stuart Sutcliffe, who was the original bassist for the Beatles.
Oh.
And he, played with them through their early years and then quit kind of right before they got huge. And I
Jeez.
remember reading that and thinking, what would it feel like to quit a band
Oh my God.
right before they become the Beatles?
Uh,
And so that was sort of the genesis for the book. And then because I'd been reading a lot of young adult romance, I then
uh-huh.
immediately thought, oh my God, and then what if they fell in love, And so that was kind of the whole book just sort of laid
Wow.
itself out. So that was super easy in comparison.
I mean, because
And
you've never been a young woman who then died.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I haven't. So yeah, so this book was tougher because I didn't like this one. I really just sat down and was like, well, what? I kind of had this idea that like ghost hunting would be fun, and I wanted to write something that was set like in the suburbs of Seattle where I grew up.
Yeah.
Not exactly where I grew up, but with that sort of DNA. Um, and I thought like a fake dating thing could be cool, like sort of a Cyrano de Bergerac, like 10 Things I Hate About You kind of thing. But I really didn't know what it was I wanted to do. And then one day I kind of got a brainstorm and sat down and just wrote a monologue from the perspective of a teenage dude who had died, just about how much it sucks being dead. Like how much, being 18 already sucks.
Oh,
Here's how much
geez.
it
Yeah.
sucks when you're dead. And it was kind of funny and like a little bit too honest, and all these different things. And I loved that vibe, but I wasn't sure what to do with it because I didn't actually want to write a story like from the perspective of the dead guy. And
Uh-huh.
that's when sort of like the sibling, like I originally I thought it was gonna be a love triangle between like the ghost hunter, the ghost, and the living sibling. And that was actually how the first draft was written.
Oh,
And
Jeez.
my editor came back and was like, I love this book, but the love triangle does not work. I'm not believing the like that the ghost hunter is falling for the disembodied ghost who like she can't even see or touch or whatever. And
Okay.
we kind of went back and
Mhm.
forth, and I tried to make it work for a while, and then realized, you know what? Like she is totally right. This is not that story. And so then I rewrote it uh to have it just be sort of a friendship between the
Mm.
main character and the ghost, and
Mhm.
everything worked much better.
Okay.
So sometimes
Wow.
sometimes a book really changes in editing. Like you don't know. But yeah, that was a tougher book to sort of nail down. Uh but in the end, it still did kind of what I loved about Dark Arts as well. Like I really like writing books where the main character is a teenager who starts out kind of jaded and grumpy and like not the greatest person, and by the end of the book, has become better and you really love them,
That's cool.
And so that's I'm realizing that's my genre is grumpy.
a growth journey.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
like stories where people become better, you know?
Hmm.
like that. W- Okay, so
I got
in
just real quick,
yeah, go.
real because I'm known for the sidebar. Just because you
Yeah, go for it.
mentioned music, have you had time over since we've last talked to do any music or
A little bit. It's funny. I've got a new like solo EP that's been sitting on my hard drive just waiting to be released. And it's one of those like it's done, it's mastered, and I
That's
just
cool.
have to convince myself like to just be okay with pushing the button and sending it live. But so I probably won't release that until after the book hubbub dies down. But I like putting that stuff up on Bandcamp just so people can hear.
man,
But also,
I wasn't gonna ask you live, but I was gonna ask you, but since you gave it away, I was gonna say, okay, Bandcamp. Do
oh
you put
yeah,
it
yeah.
you put it under your name out on Bandcamp or do
Yeah,
you
I've got my solo project is just called Oh No, It's James.
okay.
And yeah, and yeah, I just put everything up for free. It's just fun
That's so
side
cool.
project stuff. But actually what I have been doing is in the fall, I started learning to play the drums because I've always been, a
Mm.
guitarist, a bassist, a singer. But I love what drummers do, especially playing in metal as I have for so many years. Like the drummer is half the band in heavy metal.
Mhm.
And so my roommates got a drum set off of Craigslist for free. And I started learning how to play it, not realizing until they got it home that it's a child's kit. It's a junior size. So I've been learning to play these just like these brutal heavy metal blast beats on like a
Pink, pink, pink,
child's
pink, pink,
kit.
pink.
Yeah, and it's great. Um,
Does it look like in one of the little kid cars that you
no,
down?
it doesn't. It's not that bad. Like it was big enough that you didn't immediately realize looking at it that it's sort of, three-quarters size.
Oh,
But
that's
then
hilarious.
when you see a regular drum set, you go,
Oh,
"Oh."
First,
But
it's free, and if you're in a flat or an apartment or something like that, it probably works out better from a
yeah,
sound
yeah, it
perspective.
works great. It's great to learn on, and so I started taking lessons, and I've really loved it. Like it's
that's
been
cool.
super good for my mental health. I find that there's nothing that calms me down like sitting down and just spending half an hour trying to learn. And the joy of learning something, a brand new instrument like that is every time I spend 20 minutes, I feel myself leveling up.
Are you
Like
doing the
it's
Oh,
Buddy
that's
Rich
cool.
method, or are you doing
I don't
the
think so. I think it's just the sort of American heavy
the
metal
Mike
style.
Portnoy method?
Yeah. But
It's for those who are listening, which is all of you. I'm sorry you couldn't see Brad
Brad flailing around
visually
like a fish
demonstrating
out of
those
water.
methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm
yeah.
just, me fascinated. Next time we have you on, which we will,
It has to be
I
a
have
music
to,
discussion. Yeah.
yeah, it has to be because I'm just fascinated by I'd be curious as to your production method and all of that.
Oh, well, I
Oh
mean, these
yeah.
days it's
Yeah.
all just on a laptop, you know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the joy of the technology these days
Oh, I
is you
know.
can do
Amazing.
anything. I wish I were a better sound engineer. That is one
Oh,
of those things where when people say if you could wake up tomorrow and have, a skill just magically like the Matrix, like downloaded into your brain, it would be like sound production and engineering because I would love to be able to translate the songs that I write into the sounds that I want because
yeah.
I feel like I'm a pretty good songwriter, an okay player, and a terrible engineer. And that just,
Interesting.
that's fine right up until you have to make the CD. So,
I'm a sound chaser. I've been sitting upstairs on my guitar and on a Boss Katana right now with different pedals, just trying to find the right sounds. And so I'm in one of those rabbit holes trying to find the right sounds. And
yeah.
being up in Seattle, the there's there's a whole school of sound that came out of there in the 90s, independent of the whole alternative era.
Yeah.
So sorry, I sidetracked from the book, but
Oh, that's cool.
I actually can maybe bring this back around to
yeah.
writing and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've learned from music and from doing recording projects is that kind of all art is found art. And what I mean by that is I find when I write a song in my head and I know how I want it to sound, and then I sit down at the computer and try to create that,
Yeah.
I'm almost always frustrated. But if
Yeah.
I just sit down at the computer and
Oh.
say, like, I'm just gonna mess around and see what cool sounds I can find, I can build something out of those cool sounds that sounds amazing to me because I had no preconceptions about what it needed to be. Like I can just delight in the sound that I found rather than trying to replicate what was in my head. And so trying to take that kind of into everything of just like work with what's there, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that can work for writing as well, just like write the thing that sparks you, even when, I mean, I was a science fiction fantasy guy for 15 years,
Hmm.
from the tabletop industry. Nobody was looking for me to go into young adult queer contemporary romance, right?
Yeah.
There's no magic, there's no saving the world. But that was just what kind of popped out one day, and I ran with it. And
That's
I
great.
think this business, if you're going to be a writer, uh, everything we were talking about this before the show, but like every book is a lottery ticket anyway. There's no guarantees, there's no like, if you do this, you will succeed. So you might as well just do whatever you enjoy
Hmm.
and just see what happens.
Yeah.
I was gonna two pieces with that. One, I think you hit it because you just talked a minute ago about writing that monologue.
Yeah,
You took that monologue and that kind
Right.
of became your
Right.
vehicle. That was your
exactly.
jump.
Right.
And it ended up not even in the book in the end.
Hmm.
Like it was one of those things
Oh,
where it was like it was the
Hmm.
first chapter of the book, then I wrote the book, and then cut off that first chapter. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's
Wow.
what you need. Sometimes you have to write
Hmm.
your way into a project.
Jason, I have one question, and then I'll back
Yeah.
off because I've interrupted you twice, and I
No, no.
apologize.
I'm overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I was going to ask is just from your own kind of like metrics perspective and all that, when you're looking at success and all that, do you kind of monitor like Goodreads or Amazon or, how do you kind of, where do
Good.
you kind of look?
Hmm.
I mean, ultimately, success in publishing is however you want to measure it. Like there's, creative satisfaction, there's money, there's numbers of, copies. Like I could say, you know, you always want more sales, right? Like I always want the book to sell more copies than it
Right.
does. But I've gotten some tremendous fan letters from Dark Hearts. Like I've been really amazed actually at the
That's nice.
volume of letters I've gotten from people who felt really seen, especially a lot of young bi dudes who went, "Oh my
Nice.
God, like this book helped me. This book
Nice.
was like this is exactly the position I was in, or this gave me the confidence to ask my crush out." Or one person sent me a letter that said he read it because the guy he was crushing on made him like used it as like a test essentially. And he was like, I don't normally read books, but like I did it to impress this guy, and I really loved it. And I
That's
went, great,
awesome.
like somebody out there is doing the Lord's work, please. Please, if you are, young and hot, please make everybody, all your Tinder dates, read my book first, like that. I really appreciate it. But no, I mean that's been great. Like having it translated into other languages
That's
has been
so
really
cool.
cool. I'm actually going to do a signing in the Netherlands in August,
Good for you.
which I've
Oh,
never been to mainland Europe before. So my Dutch publisher's setting that up. So like there's all these metrics, but at the same time, I have a bunch of friends who are New York Times bestsellers. So if I wanted to measure myself against them,
Yeah.
I am a failure, So, and certainly, financially, I make less than almost everybody I know in Seattle because we're a tech hub, right? Like,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
it's not super lucrative to be a full-time author, especially not at the beginning. And you're sort of investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like starting when I first quit my job to write full time. I was talking with my wife and we said, well, think of it kind of like a restaurant. Like very few restaurants make money in the first 5 years because you got to get
Right.
established. And
Right.
that's sort of how I approach writing. But I recognize that that's a privilege that a lot of people don't have. Like I had some money saved up, I could make this work. Um, but I think for most people, keeping your day job is a real good idea.
Oh. Okay, so if I may, just to kind of swing back
Oh, I didn't even
into,
talk about reviews. Sorry.
oh no, we're coming back. We're
Okay,
coming back.
cool.
Yeah, but if I want to come back to the Ghost of Us because in terms of the actual writing. So so I've got two daughters. I've got two adolescent daughters. One's One's soon to ship off to college. Brad is in the same position. You've got the one daughter, and like I talk, both of mine are inveterate readers. We talk a lot about books. I always try to take an interest in what they're reading, even though what they read and what I read are light years apart in interest. They really are.
Right.
But you want to be interested. And occasionally I have recommended books or things have come up in school and they've asked me about them. And like the obligatory thing, and it's like, but that actually sounds kind of cool. What do you think, Dad? Have you read it? And one of the things that I know that we've talked about is when men, granted, there aren't a lot of examples of this,
Yeah.
but when men have written women,
Right. That's the
it
big thing.
it,
Yeah.
it I think more again through the lens of two young women, that typically fails much more often than it succeeds.
Hmm.
So I'm just from the practice, the art, the mindset of your writing, I'm curious, how was that for you to write in having a female protagonist?
Well, we'll see. I mean, so I have my theory. That said, I'm sure people will call or have already called me on, oh, look, here's this dude writing, lesbians. What a jerk. Um, the way I feel about it is I think that it sort of behooves us to try and write
Yeah,
from a wide variety of perspectives.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
don't want to write just my own character all the time.
nice.
That said, in this one, I felt like one of the things that I could do to make it a little bit easier is keep a lot of the other details of her life similar to my experience. Like the main character, Kara, whose perspective I'm writing from, like, yes, she is female, I am male. That said, she is also like a grumpy, like teenage social outcast from outside of Seattle, like in the suburbs, who wants to be
Yeah,
famous.
yeah,
Um, and is bisexual. And like, with the exception of gender, that was me,
right.
right? So like, yeah, we have a different experience based on gender, but also like a lot of our formative
Mhm.
experiences were the same.
Yeah,
And so it's going to be a lot easier to write in that character's voice. Um, and I think it's worthwhile to try and push yourself out of that. Now that said, like, you know, the farther afield you go from your own experience, the more research you have to do, the more you should get people
yeah,
to backstop you. Like I definitely had a number of my like queer female friends read the book and tell me like, "Hey, is this working?" And there were places where they were like, "Okay, this does sound like too male." Or
yeah.
at least one case it was like, "This is kind of male, but it's really funny." So I don't know. Like, but I think you need to do the research. And also recognize when maybe you don't want to tackle something. Like there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
there are certainly stories that I would not try to write because I just feel like
Nice.
I'm not gonna be able to do it very well. But in this case, if I can write from the perspective of gods and dragons and, demons and whatever when I was
Right,
writing
right.
science fiction and fantasy, like I think I can maybe pull off writing a girl from the same background as me. If I can't do that, I need to, work a lot harder. But that said, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Folks will have to read the book to see if I pulled it off.
That's great. Let's come back to reviews. I know you brought it up. We were
Oh
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
this
So
beforehand.
speaking of men writing women, let's talk about
Speaking,
reviews.
right? No, but okay, so as an author, as an increasingly accomplished author in this new genre of yours, new-ish genre of yours, um, like how do you take reviews? How do they, if at all, factor into your method?
So everybody who's been at this for a while will tell you don't read your reviews, and you absolutely will anyway, and it'll wreck you. And then eventually you learn, no, really, don't read the reviews. It's not like I'll read the trade reviews when they come out, like Publishers
Yep,
Weekly or
yep,
School Library Journal or Book List.
yep,
But I really try not to read stuff like Goodreads or
hmm,
Amazon reviews.
yep,
Just because the human mind is wired in such a way, at
yeah,
least for me and a lot of people I know, where you'll gloss over the 99 compliments and remember the one thing somebody
right,
nitpicked.
right,
And so like it's really hard to get boosted up by reviews and it's really easy to be brought down. And
Hmm.
ultimately, the book's already out there. You can't change it now.
Right.
So I
Very
think
good point.
there can be something to be learned. Um, so one thing I actually proposed to a writer friend of mine was, and I haven't done this yet, but instituting what I was calling just the day of pain, where like you take one day, a couple months after the book is out, and just read through all the reviews, take notes, see if there is legitimately something that like you're getting wrong and people are disliking that you maybe want to use to inform your future writing, and then just never look again. But like concentrate it all in one big lump sum of suffering.
And then end the day with a large binge of alcohol or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. Do whatever
You
you
know,
need to do.
yeah.
Because I think there can be things that are useful to learn especially if there's something that your audience cares about that you don't care about or that you don't know about. For instance, a thing that surprised me a lot with Dark Hearts was there was for a while there, it was like 10% of the Goodreads reviews were like, I loved this book so much. It was amazing, but there's a Harry Potter reference in it. And I just cannot abide people making Harry Potter references because among the target demographic, which is, I mean, it is a queer teen romance, and among queer teens, like J.K. Rowling sucks. But like, and I knew that, like, I
Yeah.
agree with that, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize that it had reached the point where even mentioning Jake,
Yeah.
any sort
But
of Harry
that's
Potter thing in passing is
yeah.
sort of triggering for people. And
That's an
I didn't
issue of
realize
but
that.
that's an issue of where we are as a society, not of your book.
Sure, no,
And
it
yeah.
is. But the point is,
Yeah.
like, I was still losing a star in all those reviews. And
Right.
like that aggregate rating does matter to people, does matter to the algorithm, certainly when it's
Yeah.
recommending you.
It's all the
And
algorithm now.
we're in a very weird place where with art where and I don't know any artist or author who doesn't hate this, but the fact that your book gets sort of broken down to stars, right? Like 3 out of 5 or whatever,
Hmm.
it really doesn't work because the truth is that you can have an amazing book that works for one person and doesn't work for the other person.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's a 2.5 star book. It means that it's amazing for some people and terrible for others. And it's why
Right.
like the Rotten Tomatoes effect, I think really pushes you towards sort of bland, inoffensive, but also unprovoking narratives. And then you
Yeah.
also end up in these weird, tied in these weird knots where, people will say that there are people who just reserve 5 stars for like, this author literally gave me a kidney. Like I've seen reviews, including in my work, where they just glow about how this book made them cry and laugh, and they loved it so much. 3.5 stars rounded up to 4. And I'm like, what is this? Is this like only the Bible gets 5 stars? Like, what is your metric, right? Like, but people have their own metrics, and it's only a problem because everything else that people buy on Amazon, I don't know about you, but if I look at, if I'm buying light bulbs and it has less than 4 stars, I'm like, well, these are clearly trash,
Yeah. Very true.
which is
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is a thing we're all trained to do, but it does not translate
No.
to
No.
Books.
But I don't know. You might not be fair about this, James. Some light bulbs work great for some people. Some
yeah,
light bulbs
exactly.
work less for
No,
Exactly. But
no,
so
but
I
you
think
bring that's a huge you bring
It is a
up like
problem. Yeah.
that's like an open door topic because there
Oh
almost
yeah.
should be I'd welcome a debate about a different reporting or rating system for media, books, reading, music,
but
all that versus commodity
yeah,
items,
it's well, and it's also just, but it comes down to the individuals, right? Like even when I poll my friends just sitting around, it's that question of if you liked a book, does 5 stars mean I enjoyed this book? It did everything I, want out of a book, which was an enjoyable experience? Or does 5 stars mean it was the greatest book I've ever read and I'm going to read an excerpt at my wedding? Like,
Mhm.
because those are different, those are both reasonable scales. The problem is that you're mixing those scales
Yeah.
and like
Well,
you end
and
up with people not understanding what the number means.
And on some of the, well, to that point, like just as a measure of meaningfully quantifying anything, I mean, they're so useless. It's so, but you're right, we abide by them. But what is it, Amazon, maybe eBay? Like I've been on some of these where there's actually explicit instruction. If you click on a four or lower, it warns you, hey, there's something wrong with this. This is potentially
Right, right.
damaging. It and it's like, okay, so if you're not giving a five, right, I mean, it doesn't differentiate.
Right,
It
right.
just
It's like
doesn't.
same with like Uber drivers, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
your Uber person, if they don't get 5 stars, they're getting in trouble. And unfortunately,
It,
the same is kind of true of authors, but people don't
yeah,
realize it because
yeah,
they're thinking about their experience, not
You're clicking 3.5 stars, or you're clicking three
right,
stars. Do you realize that your author may lose a kidney? Please
yeah,
click here.
right.
You know,
seriously,
or
seriously. Or
Everyone,
the same
yeah,
thing, like, this makes me think of a perennial topic amongst my science fiction fantasy friends is like people who don't want to read the first book in a trilogy until the last one comes out because they've been burned, in the past, not realizing that if you wait, that third book is less likely to come out because the
right,
series, like the publisher might axe the series before
right.
you ever get there. So like if you want to read something, honestly, if there's a book you want to read, for the love of God, pre-order. Like get
Yeah,
it as soon as
I have
possible
heard
because
that
it
from a
makes a
lot of
huge
people.
difference.
Yeah,
yeah,
we've
Well,
actually,
yeah.
because
yeah,
people don't realize the way the book trade works. So I'll tell you a weird thing that I didn't realize is
yeah,
like,
please,
so the way that like Barnes and Noble decides how many books, copies of a book they're going to put in their stores, it's not like they just take 10 copies of every book that's published. Like somebody makes a decision about which
yeah,
books will be carried in those stores. And one of the big pieces of information is pre-orders. And so if you get,
yes,
even 50 pre-orders of your book on barnesandnoble.com, then Barnes and Noble is going to be much more likely to be like, oh, well, we should have a copy of this in every store, right? And like 50
right,
is not that many. That's like, so, every time I have a book come out, I send that email to, not just my readers, but also friends and family being like, hey, pre-orders makes a huge difference. They determine print runs. They also determine whether or not you hit, if you're a big timer, like they determine whether or not you hit a bestseller list because bestseller lists count how many books did you sell that week. And every pre-order gets counted as a first week sale. So
yeah,
everybody who pre-orders over the course of that entire year beforehand counts as buying it day one. And so a lot of people are on the New York Times bestseller list for exactly one day, one week, and then they
wow,
fall off it because
yeah,
that was just all those pre-orders.
right,
So there's a lot of there are a lot of little things that can make a big difference. But like reviews, honestly, if you like a book, please review it everywhere, like on Amazon, on Goodreads, all those things, because having the number of reviews be high and having the star review be higher matters to the algorithm, whether or not
yep,
it's going to get recommended to people. And it does matter to people who are just browsing, if you a lot of
yep,
people, if you see a book that has 3 reviews on Amazon, you think, oh, well, nobody's heard of this. And unless you're into really underground indie stuff, you're probably going to pass. So more is better.
That's
Don't
actually
read your
that's actually
reviews.
no, and that's great. That's great advice, especially nowadays when you go out on Amazon
hmm
and you're finding a lot of
hmm
people in effect, air quotes, self-publishing
Well,
just
truly
the ebook.
self-publishing, yeah,
Truly
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely,
self-publishing
yeah.
ebook on Amazon, and those get and I'm not knocking them. It's just those are getting filtered in and are intermingling and mixing in with just regular published books.
Sure. I mean,
So
there's effectively no difference these
no,
days.
it's
no,
really
And
shifted.
the advent of
no.
AI is going to really flood all that. I know Amazon's having trouble with that, but honestly, word of mouth is still the most important thing
Yeah,
for any book. Like
yeah,
nobody really like you can market, and obviously if you have a huge marketing budget, you can make a book a bestseller. Like a lot of bestsellers are kind of tapped with the magic wand before they ever come out.
right, right,
Um, but beyond that, I think a lot of publishers like all publishers don't know how to make a bestseller every time, or else they would,
Of course.
So word of mouth is still the number one way. So yeah,
And
please.
even those
That's
publishers
cool.
that I dare say know how to air quote game the system don't know how to game the system every time. Otherwise, you would again
Exactly.
see that every time.
Yeah, you
You
can
know,
there are things that a publisher can do by putting a bunch of money behind a book in order
Hmm.
to uh, really sort of grease the wheels, but they still can't guarantee success, right?
no,
But more importantly, there are things that they can do. If they don't do the things to grease the wheels, it is that much harder for a book to be a success. And so there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of publishing is kind of just throwing books out there and hoping that they hit. And, a lot of people, especially with social media going the way it has, sort of falling apart, there's a lot of folks where just saying, find the right TikToker, find the right
Seriously.
influencer or
yeah,
booktuber, and it can be the weirdest, wildest thing. Like a friend of mine, had had his book got mentioned in a Twitch stream from a Polish gamer, who was just, while he was streaming, he was talking about my friend's book, and it became a bestseller in Poland
That's
like
awesome.
overnight. Just because of that one mention. So like
Well,
you
now that we know
never
the
know.
secret to success,
I know,
yes,
you
but you
gotta.
can't, there's no way to find, you can't
No.
no.
get access to that, without paying a whole bunch of money for it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
right.
whoever stumbles across your book.
Jason, when you go overseas, we're going to have you go on a mission when you
I
go over
was
the
in
summer.
Poland over winter. No one
Yeah,
told me. I could have
I
done
know
something.
you could have done something.
Yeah.
James, thanks so much for joining us. These are the conversations where
Yeah.
we kind of have hit so many different topics, and we want to have you back on
Yeah,
again
please.
as
It's always
you
such a pleasure.
Yeah.
as you work on your whether you're working on or finished or published your third book. Let us know how you're doing.
Please.
Maybe come on as you release your first gold album.
Oh yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, no, man, I still love writing music, but I am so far past thinking it's ever going to go anywhere. I'm just happy if somebody checks it out.
What about a brief soundtrack for each of the new books?
So actually, so this is lovely. I was able to, so audiobooks, like
Hmm.
both of my
Hmm.
books have audiobooks.
Yep.
And I love audiobooks and they always have like intro and outro music, like a little bit of a
Yeah,
jingle.
right, right.
And
Yeah.
so when we sold Dark Hearts, I asked the Macmillan audio team, like, where do you get those? And
Yeah.
oh, we just buy it from a service that
Right.
composes stuff. And I said, well, can I do mine? And they went, yeah, sure. So I got to do
Oh,
the intro
that's
music for Dark
cool.
Hearts, and then I got to do it again for
Oh,
The Ghost of
good for
Us.
you.
So yeah, when you hear those, the little jingle underneath the, audible, Random House Audio
Right,
presents The
right.
Ghost of Us, like the music that's playing underneath that is
Is
me.
your music.
That is
Yeah.
That is so
exceptionally
cool.
cool.
That
It
is
was really
cool.
fun. And I realized actually after that, where I was like, because I kind of just built those things relatively quickly. They don't have words. They're,
Yeah, yeah.
a minute long. And then I was thinking about it later and I went, this is probably the widest reach any single song I've ever done has gotten to
Think
date.
about that.
So many people listening to these audiobooks. So that's really fun. I really enjoy doing it.
That's really cool.
Well, I'm always looking because I do some very lame jamming here. So as you get your drumming up to beat, I don't know if you ever heard of the Beat Buddy by Singular Sound.
No.
Go look up Singular Sound and Beat Buddy. It's just a little drum pedal.
Yeah.
If you ever want to pass along some free drum beats, we can do some virtual jamming.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, first I'll need to actually be consistent in my tempo.
that's fine. I need to be consistent in my fretboards, so that's fine. James, thanks so much. We will definitely have you on again. We love having you on and talking
Yeah,
about anything music, books. We didn't even get to talk about gaming or anything this week, so
that's
Oh my
okay.
God, yeah, we'll have
yeah,
to get into it next time.
next
Yeah, we will.
time.
And congratulations, huge on book
Yes.
number two and
Thank,
upcoming three.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic as always to have James. He's our, as we just validated, a three-time guest of ours. And originally when we had him on, we did not, and James, I think we've mentioned this before. Little did we know how prolific he was as a writer. What caught our attention originally was his involvement
Yeah.
and
Deep
his
involvement with
deep,
Starfinder, Pathfinder.
yeah, and his pioneer and being a pioneer in that area. And look at what he's doing now and just how creative he is and his music as well. Um,
Well, and just, I
so
mean, so much respect, truly so much respect for taking such a change of direction professionally.
thank you, James, for spending time with us again. We'd love to have you on as you're working on your next novel. But fascinating. Follow him. We'll have all of his information, obviously, um, out on Twitter or X. I guess we should just go with X now. I guess Twitter is finally going to pass away as a term, but um, you know, obviously, as you read, if you pick up the book, you know, much like leave a review
Yeah, you should
for
pick it
any
up.
of our
You should leave a review on Amazon. You should leave a review on your podcast, Aphrodite and Mind, while you're there.
exactly.
Yep. Yeah,
Why
James,
don't
thanks so much.
if you pick it up at your local bookstore, also
Hmm.
you can also leave a review out on Amazon as well. And speaking of
Yep.
local bookstores, let's go to our virtual local bookstore.
Audubon Court.
So, boy, it has been a while
Yep.
since we've been to our um VLBS, virtual local bookstore.
Very nicely done.
Um,
Mm.
and um, the big thing is I've been waiting for this for a while, and I know Jim, Jim Johnson and I've talked about this in the past. Um,
Of Modifius and Star Trek Adventures.
yes, it almost reaches a point where I don't even think we have to introduce him that way anymore.
I'm just
Um,
pretending that we still get new listeners and it's
good
important.
point. Yeah, good point. Um, so this past week, or actually I should say 2 weeks ago, um, Chaosium announced the release of the Pendragon core
Yeah,
rule book,
very
and I
cool.
had been anxiously awaiting that. So, placed my order for that.
A
Um,
dragon who writes. Who would have thought it?
exactly
Yeah,
with
right.
a pen, no
You got it.
less.
Mhm.
Um, I picked up the starter kit a while
Hmm.
back. I had never gotten into any of the prior versions, but I had picked up um, like an older starter kit PDF, and it was always fascinating to me because it was, and especially Paladin, just because I have an affinity a bit for um, like Charlemagne era French
Okay.
Middle Age era
Uh-huh. Yes.
history, because that's where especially on the maternal side of my family, that's my family history,
Neat.
um, genealogy, and so on. So it's interesting. Is it are there dragons and stuff? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's fantasy, but there's something historical about it, and you start as a knight, and
Yeah,
so
that's neat.
we you and I go through this exercise almost regularly of as we acquire new materials, what materials do we keep, what materials move on, um, what games do we play, what games do we read, what games have we played remain. um, you know Pendragon, Paladin are in that set where I really would like us. I hope someday we might play.
Like,
I
for
just
example, the second edition of Fantasy Age.
Yes, but again, I just don't see that occurring.
Well,
It's
time is a
way
finite resource, like we were talking about earlier.
it's way way
Yeah,
down on the list. We have
yeah,
if we are going to do the next time we do something high fantasy, it's going to be Fantasy Age 2E.
yeah, without
Um,
question.
that's just because that's what we've committed to because we know the age mechanic.
Yep.
Um,
Well, and the
and it's
people at Green Ronin are great, and they put out great products.
and again and it we love the mechanic and being able to move between modern age, fantasy age. We could even play Dragon Age or the Expanse, or
Right,
there's
right,
so many.
right.
We can move between these different genres with that mechanic so easily.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, so between that and Star Trek Adventures, um, and my still unabashed love for Traveler, um,
Well, you were just
there's
telling me you did recently pick up, or at least ordered, a traveler book.
yes, I did order um the Pendragon I had ordered and then pre-ordered from Mongoose um Aliens of Charted Space, the volume 4.
Neat.
Um that's the one that and then the Deep in the Dark, which is another section of Charted Space that um a resource guide for that. Those are
Yeah, it's
the
cool.
resource guides for Charted Space and the in effect the Aliens of Charted Space. It's like the D&D version of the Monster Manual.
Okay, got it.
And as usual, you've posted it before. Mongoose's material is always top notch.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I love their stuff, and I am seriously one of the reasons I have to reorganize my bookshelf is um, my my traveler shelf has is the shelf is literally starting to warp a little bit, so I
Nice.
um, have to move. So those are,
Well
that's what's
done.
in waiting, and right now from a reading perspective, I think I told you it's literally, I am awaiting to see what occurs next month, August.
Yep.
And between what's that and some of the stuff that I have been reading, which I will wait for a future episode to discuss.
Excellent.
Um, it's been busy, but from your perspective, you have been doing, we've talked about what you've been writing,
Yeah.
and now in the next couple of weeks, you have some people that are doing some writing really in effect for you.
I mean, in a
And you'll be
sense, yeah.
in a sense, and you're going to be having some uh, virtual get-togethers for those. If I'm
Yes,
giving away anything,
thank you for accepting one of those invitations.
I
Slowly.
accepted both of them, I
Oh, okay,
think.
good. Thank you. Excellent. Slowly
Yes.
those are populating.
Yep.
Um,
But what else is going on with you
well,
from
so
a writing or reading?
to demystify this, I think it now this is already old news by the time this episode drops, but not as we're recording. So, Aaron and I, right, Dr. Aaron Peterson, one of our regular guests, we'll have him on when he's not so much in transit. But we signed a contract for another book, this time an edited anthology of leadership in Star Trek, which is pretty cool. And like you said, yeah, we've got all kinds of people on the author team who are going to be writing, and hopefully by this point are writing a really, really interesting range of chapters. I mean, across fields, across disciplines. I mean, just everything from scientists to attorney to television production. I mean, it's all in there, which is cool. But yeah, it's required a fair amount of upfront work. And of course, next month I have to write my chapter. So so that's happening after as we record this, I have just literally just 2 days before returned from a family trip. And then in about 2.5 weeks, heading out for another trip. And then when I get back from that, yeah, I'll have to sit down and write. But in terms of reading, um, boy, game wise, there's so much on like that we keep talking about, and there's so much on my interest list. But in terms of actual reading, there hasn't been much. Although this morning, I was telling you this off air, this morning, over coffee, I sat down and I read the uh starter adventure, the example adventure in the Star Trek Adventures second edition quick start guide, just to get a sense, a feel for how Chewie rolls, if you will. And that was fun. That was a very relaxing way to start the day. Um, Otherwise, I mean, there's other stuff adjacent, like at some point we're gonna have to talk about the Acolyte from Star Wars.
Yes.
But
We
but
have to talk
we'll,
about the wrap up of Discovery,
we have to talk about the Rapid Discovery. We've got to,
Prodigy season 2.
honestly, I'm just gonna say this on air, as it were. Yeah, I think we're going to need to dedicate an upcoming episode just to talk about, and I realize this is all sci-fi, but there's a lot that is happening or wrapping this spring and summer, right? Or is new. So right, okay, so Prodigy season two, which we haven't watched yet. We
Mhm.
will, right? That drops today, I think, on the first, right? Um,
Oh,
and I haven't my thinking is to maybe watch one a day. We'll see.
oh.
We need to talk about, right, we need to talk about The Acolyte. Yes, we need to talk about Star Trek Discovery ending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of stuff like that. I think we're just going to have to dedicate an episode to talking about that and talking about where that goes and what its implications are for play,
We
etc.
should have we should have a
Round,
fan guest on. Just have someone, not even necessarily a regular, or just someone who's maybe who's a fan who isn't necessarily involved in any of those shows. Um,
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I
something
like it.
I'm that's just I'm workshopping it
Yeah.
on the recording, but
Or a round
um,
table.
oh, roundtable would be good
Or a
too.
round table. And we just compare notes and compare thoughts. Yep.
Yeah, I
All
like that
right.
idea. That would actually be a really good episode to have toward the end of July because we're gonna be in the middle of
Yeah. Or
um
or realistically, given how
yeah,
long that will take to organize, I'm thinking probably before the fall starts.
yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Probably before the fall starts. Um, but at that
Before the
point,
before the first flakes fall, is that what you're
right.
saying?
But at
Yeah.
that point, we will also know more in terms of timing regarding Star Trek Lower Decks, regarding the next season, maybe of Rings of Power, like all of that stuff. Maybe there'll be a little Stranger Things. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I we'll keep playing with this and we'll just not even bother to hang a curtain over the fourth wall anymore.
Yeah, I don't
No.
I think I have burned that
Yes.
curtain a
But
long time ago.
But that said, as we close out, stay tuned because we do have another really, really cool episode coming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, coming this month yet. Mo Moving forward, because of travel plans and summer plans, we're gonna take a little break. Don't worry, we're still gonna have an episode. And then, as always, more to come.
Well, yeah, I think we can give away. We have our unofficial Dyson Mind meteorologist. I don't
Yeah.
think we've ever asked her to be our meteorologist, but by default,
Yes, and
you know,
that's going to be our obligatory, it seems, summer rerun
yeah,
because it was a wonderful discussion. It's one of our more popular
yeah,
episodes.
yes, it
Um,
is.
and man, Katie, if you're listening, we're talking about you. Which we really need to have her back.
We do.
Yeah.
She has been, I think I just messaged you. We've seen her. She's out on YouTube Shorts.
Oh yeah.
She's shown up. She was just doing some of the regional. She just did I noticed on X, she did some regional Emmy presentations.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
if you follow her on X, she does storm chasing. She was doing some
Yeah.
storm chasing with her mother,
Mm-hmm.
more recently.
Very cool.
She had a very cool, if you, I found this one interesting just as a weather nerd. Um, a cool hail comparison chart.
That was
Um,
awesome.
yeah, you can, is it Tribble sized? Is it Funko Pop sized? How big of the hailstone size is it?
Oh,
So,
that reminds me. Speaking of hail, if
yeah.
you haven't already, at some point this week, text our dear friend Eric, ask him about hail damage.
Oh
I'm not
no.
going to say anything. Just text him and ask him. It's
Sunday,
remarkable.
okay, I'll text
Yeah.
him tomorrow. It's a little late for Eric,
Yeah,
but
yeah, he's pretty geriatric.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric, but he doesn't listen. He doesn't
Not
listen.
not really. All right, everybody.
Maybe if you put his name in this show note,
Ooh,
maybe at the end of this show note, say, Eric, we mention you.
I think he would appreciate being directly associated with this much nerdery.
I think you should put it in this show note and see if he'll actually listen to this part and see if it comes up.
Well, but Eric does listen and or lies that he listens. And either way, we appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess it does.
Yeah.
At least we'll get one more download this week. Hey, before you
That's
go,
yeah.
one more question. What does your shirt say?
Oh, okay. So this is an audio podcast. Okay.
Yes.
So a number of years ago, my family and I, this is when the girls were little, we went to Boston in fact, I did have to pocket car while I was in Boston. We went to Boston to visit my wife's younger of two brothers. who had recently moved out there. And then you know me, so like we wandered around Harvard, we wandered around MIT. This dates that I had just started teaching at the university at this point, and I was teaching the quant course. And so,
Want course?
sorry, quantitative research course, quantitative method course, sorry.
Okay.
And
Not all of us know this terminology,
yeah, fair,
realize, right?
questionable if I do.
Okay.
And so we were there, and my wife was like, "Oh, that's a hilarious shirt. You should get that." And my girls thought it was great because I could wear it to class, which in fact, I haven't had to teach it for a couple of years. I just redesigned the course and I'm teaching it this fall. So I'm going to, even though it's on Zoom, I'm going to wear this in a sport coat the first day. And I'm going to make sure that they can see it. The shirt says, it's white on black. Life is hard. Sorry, no, it doesn't. It says, math is
Math is
hard.
hard.
Math is hard. So is life. Get over it.
What about the shirt that I was going to get you on my trip?
That said, please stop calling me.
That is not what it said, but we can't read that one over the
All
air on
right.
this podcast.
Nope, nope, nope. We'll talk more in November. All right, everybody. You know what to do. As always, thank you so much on behalf of both of us for listening. Please, if you like us, rate us. We really mean that. We have very, very few ratings. We're terrible at self-aggrandizement. We're terrible at it, but we really, really appreciate it when you all can leave us 5 stars and especially a comment on Dyson Mind. I kid you not, we're doing pretty well in the Netherlands, but
Hey,
nowhere
we're
else
top
are.
100 in the
I
Netherlands,
know,
aren't
which
we?
is just weird. Yeah. So,
Wait, before we go, and I mean this sincerely, um,
oh
I
no,
gotta no, um let's
it's bad enough when he plans these.
yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I shouldn't do this.
Probably.
Um,
If you have to ask the question, weren't we just talking about this? If you have to ask the question, the answer is no.
so if in Dutch, thank you is bedankt.
Right.
So for those that listen to us in the Netherlands,
Bedankt.
bedankt.
I mean, where to
Now
go
that
with that?
okay.
Where to go with that? I was actually just nearby Amsterdam, flying through, and I guess we're not going to be flying through this time, but it's a wonderful country. It is a gorgeous city. It's a beautiful airport. Thank you, all of you, maybe 3 of you, who are in the Netherlands and listening.
Schiphol is a beautiful
It's a
airport.
beautiful airport. Yeah, so you know the deal, everybody. Please do leave Dyson Mind a review. Spread the word, tell your friends. We're a little biased here, but we think we have had a run of just remarkable guests lately. I don't know why any of them have been gracious enough to waste time with us, but we are delighted that they have, and it continues. In the meantime, be well, stay well. We will see you in a couple of weeks.